Hi, welcome. This is Michael Shearer reading Walking a Rainbow, a true story of walking across Spain on the Camino de Santiago with my son, Kez, age 9 at the time. And this is chapter 8, called Male and Female Created He Them. And begins at a convent just outside of Pamplona, and deals with walking into Pamplona and what happened there. Walking a Rainbow, chapter 8, Male and Female Created He Them. I was up at 8:30 and popped out to find Kez's Mars bar. Sounds of a loom or some other machinery came from the upper floors of the convent. The nuns were already at work. The sun had started burning a hole through the blue sky. Back at the refuge everyone had gone and Kez was still deeply asleep. I found a forgotten staff and a length of scarlet cord and fashioned a hand grip and a loop for my wrist, so I couldn't drop it. I was to become very attached to this stick. People do. I've seen tears in the eyes at the realisation that some tatty bit of wood has been left behind in a bar. Things that we rely on get invested with our appreciation. I suppose even inanimate things. I came to feel I could understand somewhat the naming of swords. We bestow humanity like a knighthood on the instrument which earns it. So we name our ships, our houses, and some their computers. Around 11 we were ready to go. We were already on the outskirts of Pamplona, so it was all road and urban traffic. I posted my letters. As we strolled through the busy streets, I told Kez about a second dream I'd had in the convent. It was a much more intellectual dream, as if my logical side was trying to compensate. I dreamt that I was lecturing, and my subject was fate. Fate, I had explained, was a mathematical discipline, like physics. What happens to a person is a consequence of two things, their desires and their needs. The desires are rational. People plan and try to achieve what they want. Needs are usually not known or very poorly known. They are not known because people don't really want to be aware of what they need. What actually happens is whatever is the stronger, the desires or the needs. People try to organise their lives so their desires are satisfied, but when a need is stronger, the desires are overruled and something else happens more conducive to the needs. Very often, because the needs are resisted, the pressure of the needs become very strong, and they forcefully overcome the desires. The resulting events are disruptive and maybe even traumatic. However, this is complicated by the sheer number of people. Each person's desires and needs go into one common system, like different objects in a mutually created gravitational field. So what actually happens depends on the relative strengths of desires and needs of everyone within a complex, interactive psychological system. I had regularly glanced at Kez while relating all this. He looked puzzled, as well he might. I kept forgetting he was only 9. Maybe this was all too difficult, or too weird. "It was just a dream, Kez," I said softly. "Sounds about right," he said thoughtfully. "Must be something like that." He paused. We crossed a side street amid the busy crowd. "I had a dream last night too," said Kez warily. "Did you? That place seems good for dreams. What did you dream?" "I dreamt I'd given birth to a black baby." Now that's a deep one. I launched, as teachers are prone to do, into the significance of black and white, and day and night, and one emerging from the other, and cited the Taoist symbol. "What's the Taoist symbol?" "You know, the yin-yang sign. Circle with a double curve down the middle. Black one side, white the other, and so on." "You mean like that over there?" On a white wall that we were passing at that moment was an enormous, elaborate painted mural, some 30 feet long, with a large Taoist symbol in its centre. "Bloody hell!" I cried in astonishment. To the right of the Taoist circle, as we looked at it, on the black side, was a dark volcanic landscape in the shape of a face, with a single sinister green eye and a cone of fire as the other socket. On the left, on the white side, was a flying white dove, framed by a sun over a beautiful blue waterfall. It summed up what I'd been trying to say. We looked at each other a bit stunned. I took a photograph of it in some confusion. We walked on in serious silence, only to be faced with a large graffiti on a wall in English. "Keep laughing," it announced inexplicably. So we did. "This is getting a bit heavy," I said. "Perhaps we needed it," said Kez, grinning. Soon we crossed over the Rio Arga once more, walked along a park by the massive, mossy city walls, and entered Pamplona by an ancient gate. The cobbled streets, with their 5- and 6-storied houses with many iron verandas, were strung with Basque flags, a busy, picturesque city. Slim, pretty young girls seemed everywhere, like a flush of jasmine, with that stylish, pert, elfin look I associate with Paris. Here were shops for artists' materials, potters' studios, a restoration workshop, craft shops. This place had style. In the centre was a wide, airy square with plane trees, a bandstand, and pigeons bathing in a fountain. Around the edge of the square were tables outside many bars, with neat waiters in aprons. It was all rather bustling, and we felt lost. We had got used to wider spaces, and there was too much going on here. "What shall we do?" said Kez. I consulted the map. "Well, there's a refuge just a couple of kilometres beyond Pamplona. I vote we take an easy day. Walk to this refuge, dump our rucksacks, and then come back into Pamplona for a look around and try to find Claudio." "Fine, let's go." On the way through the town, we shopped in a supermarket for some food, passing just beyond the checkout to dump all unnecessary packaging to save weight. The cardboard box over a tin of sardines, for example. I poured the coffee from its jar into a plastic bag and dumped the jar. Half the bag of sugar got thrown away. Sugar is very heavy. It was a short, easy walk to Thithur Menor. Here a passer-by directed us to a large private house as the refuge. We knocked gingerly on the huge door, and were very politely greeted in English by a petite woman, Maribel Ronsal, who maintained this refuge out of the goodness of her heart. Many good women on this route, it seemed. She showed us into a room with sturdy wooden bunk beds, and urged us to make ourselves comfortable and to use the large garden just outside. The garden was well cared for and rather English, save for the palm trees. Collapsed in the shade was an enormous dog. A great lump of doggy flesh. It looked more like a small bear. I'm not up on dogs, but it looked like a St. Bernard to me. The poor thing, slumped on the ground and immobile, panted heavily, and its immense sad eyes seemed to say, "Do something about this heat." It was not a suitable dog for Spain. "Sort out your pilgrim's passport, Kes. We'll get them stamped in Pamplona." Our passports had to be rubber stamped each day to prove that we had traversed the entire route. Back in town, we tried the cathedral for the stamps. Not a pretty building. A classical design, twin towers and a portico, looking more like a public library or a London college than a cathedral. It looked as if it had been cut out of cardboard. Severe, gloomy and unfriendly inside, except for the cloisters, with delicate tracery of cusped circles and stars of David. Gravestones in the floor here with numbers and holes like tiny letterboxes. A really snazzy last address. 228 The Cloisters, Pamplona Cathedral, Spain. Back in the nave, we knocked on the sacristy door, where a crusty old man reluctantly let us in. Here we were left in a tall, tawdry room in faded plush that looked like a failed, posh tea room. No sense of the creativity of rebirth here, just the decay of slow dying. The excessive height of the room, trying to impress, only diminished. It was an attempt to belittle, as the posh usually is, rather than elevate its occupants. The old man, so often in this space, defended himself by means of a tetchy self-importance. Half a dozen priests arrived in full regalia, clearly the disrobing room. At first they were stern, until one told the others that he'd seen us the day before walking down the main road in the heat of the day. Suddenly they were all smiles and questions, and there was much "Valiente!" and scuffing Kez's hair. "What do you get for thumping a bishop?" said Kez, grimacing. Then one, still in full ecclesiastical dress, processed to a huge cupboard and returned with stamp and pad aloft and ceremonially stamped our documents. "Are we married now, Dad?" said Kez sarcastically. There was much handshaking all around. Outside, we were strolling around aimlessly when we bumped into Claudio. "Hello, do you want to see some filming?" "Yes," said Kez. "No, not me. You go with Claudio, Kez. I'll go for a wander. I'll see you here in an hour." "Okay." I wandered around until I found a terrace with a wonderful view of the plain we had crossed, with the mountains in the far distance. It was at the elevated corner of the city walls. An official notice announced in English, "Don't remain on the wallboard. Full danger." There were fine old trees and plenty of good shade. A breeze sighed through the translucent mint-green leaves. Dotted around were stone benches, tables like miniature dolmens, and a small fountain like a font in the shade. People sat around or lay stretched on the sparse grass, talking and laughing like a scene in Renoir. Suddenly it felt a long way from home. I didn't belong here. I was a transient, passing through. Then amid the Spanish chatter I heard some English. A stocky man sat talking to a small group nearby. I went up to him. "It's good to hear English," I said, grateful. He introduced himself, Rudy, a Mexican-American, and we started to chat. Meanwhile the group faded away. He had been reading his poems to them. "Let's go and have a drink," he suggested. In the corner of the terrace was an attractive bar, the Maison del Caballo Blanco, House of the White Horse. An exotic place, light grey stone with sandstone lancets and a rectangular tower. Inside it was dark like a chapel. A stone ceiling, and the only light, apart from the door, from a glowing wall studded with thick brown and green bottle glass. He ordered red wine, swigged his down, and immediately ordered another. He had a dark complexion that looked as if it had suffered thousands of insect bites. He began to tell of his wife, who was Danish. She had left him. He lit an American cigarette and put out the match with his fingers without licking them first. Then he stuck the spent match in his brawny forearm. Seeing me stare at this, he did it again. He had big hands, heavy and awkward, like hand-shaped boxing gloves. One thumb constantly twitched. The knuckles of both fists were, I noticed, heavily calloused. This guy liked to fight. "We will go to another bar," he said. "You're my friend." This he announced loudly to the entire bar. "We go now, and we do not pay." Everyone ignored him. Well, actually, I've got to meet a friend." "We go to another bar," he shouted. We went to another bar. He ordered red wine, sank it swiftly, ordered another. "You a soldier?" he asked. I was dressed from head to foot in khaki with walking boots. "No, I thought you were a soldier. All my friends are soldiers. Were soldiers. They're all dead now." "Why are they all dead?" "I was in Vietnam and Angola and Katanga." Was that possible? The Americans weren't in Angola, were they? You must have been a mercenary. "Yeah, professional soldier. All I know how to do is to kill. Now what do I do?" "Katanga? That's the Congo, isn't it? Have you read Conrad?" "Conrad who?" "Well, then, never mind." "We go now, and we do not pay," he shouted. The next bar was full of Basque men. He was obviously well known to them. They were plainly sizing the two of us up, judging whether there was enough of them and whether it was worth it. I stood as tall as I could and tried to look military. Suddenly he said impetuously, "Life is a tangle, and death is only a double step. It's as simple as that." A double step? He froze and feigned a collapse. "It's as simple as that." In the next bar he announced to everyone as we arrived that I was his friend. It was intended as a warning. I tried to look casually mean, doing my Clint Eastwood impression, rolling an invisible cheroot from one side of my mouth to the other. "This is a good bar. You can get anything here. Any drug you like you get here," he said proudly. I found myself, appropriately enough, torn by Rudy. He was clearly dangerous, and I wanted to get the hell away. On the other hand, he was such a desperately lonely man, and full of anger. If the only possible human contact for him was with his calloused knuckles, that would do. His knuckles spoke of him. There was something raw and vulnerable, but scabbed over. I didn't want just to dump him like useless packaging, but I didn't know how to get away from him without making things even worse. After the next bar, he hesitated, considering where to go next, and I began to walk in the direction where I knew Kes must be waiting and getting worried. So, via another 2 or 3 bars, I lost count, we got to the point where I could see Kes in the distance, and I waved and shouted. He came hurrying up. "Where have you been?" You're well late. I'll tell you later. Is this your friend? Said Rudy in an odd voice. It is your son. I can see father and son walking together. His hard-bitten face softened. Kez embodied all he hadn't got. He struggled with his feelings and lost. He began to weep. He embraced me, his heavy body shaking in my arms. He turned to Kez. You look after your old man. He's my friend. I shook his hand and we walked away. Rudy shouted after us. Any time you're in Pamplona, you look me up. Ask anywhere. Everybody knows me. I waved.